Hello, my name is Veronika Koller. I work at the Linguistics Department at Lancaster University in the UK, and I'm very much interested in discourses around politics, around business, and also, particular interest of mine is metaphor.
Tell us about the key themes of your book, Discourses of Brexit. What does it set out to explore?
This is a book that I edited and contributed to with two colleagues, and it sets out to look through the language lens to understand what led up to the Brexit referendum and also the reasons for it and the processes that the referendum back in 2016 triggered. So it looks both at what we call discursive drivers before the referendum running up and also discursive consequences. So how did people use language in the run-up to the referendum and how have they used language since the referendum up to 2018 about. And we look at a very wide range of data. So the contributors look at parliamentary discourse, they look at social media, they look at speeches, all sorts of things really to understand what role language use played in the referendum and in the Brexit process since the referendum.
Why is it important that we examine the impact of language in the EU referendum?
Because I think many people are often unaware of the role that language plays, really. So language is a bit like wallpaper. We all produce it all the time, we receive it all the time, etc. But we rarely stop to think how it is used. So people may look at what other people say, what politicians, campaigners, the general public, etc. say, but it's a special approach to look at how they say it. So that can be quite subtle, really, subliminal even. So to give you an example from the referendum campaign, for instance, so as I'm sure we all know, the slogan of the Leave campaign was "Take back control." Really, that was then recycled even after the referendum, etc., even crops up in discourse to this day. What one of the Remain campaigns had for their slogan was "Britain stronger in Europe." So on the face of it, you thought, yeah, okay, that sets out their positions, what they're saying there. But if you look at how they use language, take back control is what we call a directive. So it's directly asking the listener to do something, take back control, Whereas Britain stronger in Europe, that is a short form of a sentence, Britain is stronger in Europe or would be stronger in Europe, and that doesn't ask you to do anything. It doesn't engage the reader, as does take back control, which asks you to do something. So that's a really subtle difference, which otherwise might get easily overlooked. And the book is full of examples of that, where language is used in very subtle, nuanced ways, but it makes an awful lot of a difference.
How have discourses around Brexit developed since the book was written?
The book came out in March 2018, so almost 2 years ago from the moment in time where I'm speaking. And of course, a lot has happened since. Throughout 2019, we saw a lot of parliamentary debate around Brexit, some of it very heated, some of it quite aggressive. And of course, researchers, including myself, have continued to work on that. Also looked at, how Brexit is perceived and the Brexit process is perceived in other countries, especially with these parliamentary struggles, how they were regarded outside of Britain, what the rest of the world made of them, really. Then, of course, we had the general election in December 2019, where often the technicalities of Brexit were sort of talked about in a persuasive way. We remember perhaps the often ready deal there. So it was really about how do we manage the Brexit process in an advantageous way. Noticeable use of metaphors there, really. And then, of course, in January 2020, Brexit did, at least nominally, happen, and Britain went into a transition period. And around that time, January 2020, there was a lot of discourse around Brexit that showed a future orientation. So that was noticeably different. So it was no longer about what should be done or the basic questions of where we're going with Brexit. Brexit had nominally happened. It was very much the long-term future, so a post-Brexit future for the UK. What will happen, no longer what should happen. And then, of course, COVID happened, and for a while eclipsed everything. It even seemed to eclipse Brexit divisions for a few precious weeks or months. So for a while, it didn't matter anymore whether your grandparents had voted for leave because you had to protect them from the virus. Now, as I'm speaking, early December 2020, the end of the transition period is a matter of days and weeks, really. And we see Brexit discourse really being resurgent now. Also with regards to the future, but perhaps in this case, more the immediate future rather than the long-term future and projections for that.
You are currently working on a book about discourses of COVID-19. What led you to do this?
As I said, COVID eclipsed, well, not just Brexit discourses for most of 2020, but pretty much anything else, really. I think everybody struggled to get on the agenda in the view of COVID. But what I perceived was that here again, we have phenomenon, an event that is international, even global in scale in this case. And it very soon got nationalized. It got harnessed for national interests. So not just in the UK, that happened really across the world, in many countries where the political discourse, if you will, around COVID very much linked it to national interests or national self-image, etc. And there are some parallels, I think. I mentioned initially that one of my special interests is metaphor. And I think there's a transfer of metaphors which are familiar from Brexit discourse that we now see popping up in slightly different form in discourses around COVID as well. So perhaps most obviously the war metaphor. So in this case, not war with an abstract entity that is Brussels or the EU, but very much talk of an invisible enemy. Again, not just in Britain, around the world, really. Also a journey metaphor, perhaps this whole narrative of we're going through hard times to reach better times. So that's a parallel that I can see, really. So even if Brexit is tough, there will be a positive future. Likewise, for the pandemic. Perhaps also a bit of a discourse around freedom and liberty more recently. So we had that with Brexit a long time. So we had lots of metaphoric things like, unfettered access or the shackles of the EU, etc., etc. There's also now a debate in some countries, on how far governments can actually curb liberties and freedoms as a reaction, to the pandemic. So perhaps there's a bit of a parallel emerging there as well.